Hello again. One of the things which I have noticed as a definite trend is that those in favour of immigration and allowing a lot of refugees and asylum seekers to enter Britain almost invariably belong to the middle classes. Now, I have nothing personally against middle class people, although I find that I seldom see eye to eye with them on most issues. It really is obvious, though, when talking to people, the ones who want open borders and voted to remain in the common market seem mostly to be those of this class. Talk to the average working man or woman and you generally find quite a different attitude to such things. Why should this be? One reason is, of course, the simple fact that working class people are far more likely to suffer the ill effects of immigration than are middle class ones. If you live in social housing, you are very likely to have neighbours from Africa, Asia and Eastern Europe these days. I have known people in places like Romford, which was once an Essex town and is now part of East London, and seen how sharply they see their environment deteriorate once the local authority or housing association begins to put penniless and rough Romanians or Nigerians into a block of flats. To give a simple example, when the areas were full of people whose origins are East London, traditional working class people, East Enders, the landings of communal areas of blocks of flats are often swept and kept clean by the residents. Once you get too many foreigners from certain places and immigrants moving in, those areas quickly come to resemble giant ashtrays or rubbish bins. Late night noise increases, and the accepted but unwritten rules about how neighbours behave towards each other soon vanish. I know people who started out indifferent to or even vaguely sympathetic towards foreign immigrants coming to live on their housing estate change and start to make strenuous efforts to get an exchange somewhere which is not yet vibrant and mixed once they've had the full multicultural experience. This is something which middle class people simply cannot understand. If you live in a house with its own garden and perhaps a high metal gate at the front of it, which might fetch 400,000 or 500,000, not uncommon these days, your neighbours are unlikely to be Bulgarian labourers or African immigrants who have recently landed on the beaches of Kent. You are likely to know such people only through watching television or seeing their pictures in The Guardian. It does not affect you directly, not in real life. Well, one way it does affect you is, of course, beneficial towards you in that you find you've got plenty of cleaners from other countries to choose from, which means by the laws of supply and demand, the amount you have to pay people to do your cleaning goes down. Such people are usually claiming benefits, so they're happy to work for a low rate. Then there are Polish plumbers, foreign nannies and gardeners. Of course, this is another problem for working class people because many of them used to work as cleaners, gardeners and childminders, but somehow there's no longer any work for them. It is all being done by foreign immigrants. This is not, I know I'm going to be denounced for racism here, I don't really care. I'm talking about how things are, not how they appear in the Guardian newspaper, not how they're reported by the BBC. I'm talking about the real world of East London, Essex and large cities like Birmingham and Manchester. This is the reality that I'm describing. There's another way that the experience of immigration is different from middle class and working class people. If you are a solicitor, banker, engineer or architect, you're unlikely to be competing with African immigrants for the available jobs, so the middle classes are not worried about their own employment prospects when immigration goes up. Then too, there are young people who wish to get a council house near where they have grown up, that is to say, near their parents. These are not the offspring of middle class parents. Such youngsters often rely upon what is sometimes called the bank of mum and dad to provide them with a deposit so that they too can become property owners at an early age. Again, they're not competing with immigrants in any sense. Those young English people that want to get a council house or social housing property near their parents are usually out of luck because there's an awful lot of Afghan refugees, immigrants that have arrived from Kent. There's a huge demand for council houses and social housing. A lot of it's not going to those people whose families have lived in the area for centuries and their children have grown up there. Then too there are, well, let me just mention for a second the area where I live. This is a former London County Council housing estate. It's called the Debden Estate. Although I bought my home, which is a former council house, there are still many houses locally on this street that are owned by the local authority, or some are owned by housing associations across the road. This, by the way, is the Epping Forest district. I can observe the differences over the last few years here for myself. These range from the local church, St Nicholas, having been sold to the Romanian Orthodox Church, and a consequent influx of Romanians to the area, all the way through to noticing that when I walk in the streets these days and pass a young mother with children in the street, I'm more likely to hear her speaking an Eastern European language than I am English. This is to say nothing of the number of women wearing hijabs that I'm seeing out and about in Debden and Loughton. Our Member of Parliament is Eleanor Lang, who is the Deputy Speaker in the House of Commons, and of course she sees none of this. She lives in Thaden Boys, a couple of miles away on the other side of a stretch of countryside. Things are quite different there, and there are no plans to build any social housing in that part of the Epping Forest district. This is how it is all over Britain when it comes to immigration, with working people bearing the brunt of the problems and the middle class escaping unscathed, or even actually benefiting. In short, to use Marxist terminology, the proletariat shoulders the burden while the bourgeoisie sit back and take it easy. It was ever thus in this country.